I often talk about on my show is that we've got to get back to those basics, things, the simple things like bringing the family round the table at meal times. I think people often talk about trying to get communities here, there and everywhere, but if we can't get the community back where the children are sitting around the table and you're eating some wholesome food, you haven't got the television on or the radio or all these other distractions, and you talk to one another about your day and your plans and how things are going, and you understand each other, to me that is the very start of getting back to basics. But also some of those time-worn traditions and customs that we've grown up with, or perhaps in recent times not grown up with. Things about getting back into nature and enjoying the wonders of this world. I was watching a film I watched the end of a film when I was with Julia picking up her children who had been at her mum's, and they'd been watching this very modern film, and it was all set in cityscapes. It was all with glass and big sky buildings and things. It was all very, great adventure and everything, but it was normalizing the city as a place to live. And there was barely any countryside, any sense that you grew your own food or that you could enjoy the wonders of nature and real animals and things. Everything was very fast, and they were even introducing AI as the way that you're cared for or looked after, and robotic friends, which again is normalizing what the next generation are going to see if we don't get back to basics. So yes, I'm very much on that page.
Richard, you're quite right. I mean, the one thing that I don't know whether you still do, the one thing we always do is get round the table. Phones are banned, and we sit down and have a meal. Sometimes, even though I've been married for nearly 40 years, we can still be sat round the dinner table at 10 o'clock at night over a glass of wine still talking.
Yeah, well, we've got remote television altogether, so I don't have a television because the news came on after this particular film, and although the film had been uplifting and everything, suddenly the news came on. It was news about something going on in the Middle East. To be honest, I haven't really been following any of that because it's all very negative. It's all keeping your vibrations low. And actually, I can't do anything about that. But what I can do is I can do things with my family. We can have great fun. We can go out into the countryside. We can grow our own food. We can go and enjoy life and thrive and not feel constantly under threat. Another thing, of course, we can do is avoid some of these large corporations, because we do seem to be in a corporate takeover right now, where these big corporations are telling us how to think, the things that we should have, all the gadgets, and forcing us constantly to want more and be in a materialistic world. And going back to the more simple life of appreciating the here and now, and of course nature's beauty, without constantly thinking I've got to keep up with the Joneses and have a bigger car or a bigger house, or getting myself into more and more debt, which is something which I think is spiraling around, that people are falling into that trap of always wanting something more than what they've actually got. And one of the things that when I moved into this house that is now where I live, which is a 2-up, 2-down terraced house, and my studio here is actually the master bedroom, is the gratitude of just simple things. We've almost forgotten to be thankful for what we have. And I tried to instill that with my children. I know that Julia and I are extremely grateful for everything that we have and the things that we do and the people that we meet, and we try to share that in our videos. Another basic thing that we do, because I said I got rid of the television, is we make our own entertainment. Very often, Julia and I know people will find this very old-fashioned, perhaps they won't want to do it themselves, but we'll sit in front of our wood-burning stove with a few candles or low light, so we've not got all that LED lights in our faces, and we read to each other. We absolutely love it. We're transported to another world on these wonderful books that we read, usually second-hand books from a different time period, which is, again, very enjoyable and embracing, and has a lot of morals and ethics from the old days when people treated each other very civilly. And that would lead me on to another way, the way that we've almost lost our manners. We've lost how we deal with one another in the street. We've even lost the ability to dress respectfully. Now, I'm not suggesting everybody has to wear a cravat and dress the way I do, but people have sort of lost their own respect. And it's such a shame. And I think that some of these things just give us that confidence to go out and face the world. And also, the confidence is something that we've lost because we've given away our responsibility to governments and councils and anybody else. And we're no longer, it would seem to me, able to stand up on our own and say, yeah, I can do that. I don't need the council to do these things for me. I can actually do some of this. We used to hold meetings in village halls and decide about what was going to go with our locality. We used to have street parties. People used to care. People used to go to the pub and sing songs and get involved in local amenities. We used to have a newspaper that was actually about the town. We had radio stations that used to do reports in hairdressers and bakers and show off the local businesses. And as I said just now, the corporations seem to have taken over. We've seen the uglification of Britain. Everything's become utilitarian and bland. And I think we should be fighting back by setting up our own businesses, investing in those family-run businesses where people cared about the product and the service that they gave, without having to have the CCTV and the facial recognition technology and all of that. So so that would be some of my getting back to basics. Very simple things, and not being drawn into all these very strange fads that we're seeing with various gender identities and all of that, which of course the children are coming back from school with some very unusual ideas, which obviously we all have to progress, otherwise we would all be sitting in caves and nothing would happen. But sometimes progression for the sake of it, when it's very skewed, is not very helpful. And some of those old traditions that we used to have about putting the family first and family values and respecting others, I think they could certainly do with that in the education system.
I think you're 100% right. I cannot understand why little boys aren't celebrated for being little boys and little girls aren't being celebrated for being little girls. What are we trying to do to these children? And education, to me, used to be the 3 R's, if you remember: reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Absolutely.
It was, and you get children now that come out at 11 years old that can't read or write or do sums.
And also confidence is no longer, the kids are trained to obey all the time and no longer ask questions. And some of the things that it would be really useful for children to know is things like common law. What are their rights? What are they allowed to do? What is part of them as a human being? Although human these days is a word that we have to worry about because it's the colour of man and all of that. And money, it would be nice if children were taught what money really is and what you do with it, rather than just getting a salaried job in which you become in the debt system. So I would love to see more of that. And we were talking before we were recording about the old system of pounds and ounces and the imperial pound, shillings and pence, when you've got sixpence when the tooth fairy came, and the threepence, and all these wonderful old coins that had a certain value. And now the decimalisation of everything, where everything is very much again become bland. We've lost the halfpenny. Even when we went to decimal, we had halfpence or halfpenny, as I like to call them, and the money is sort of just disappearing. We're all going online, and that business about cash and the private transactions that you have with different people. I remember being a kid going into the old sweet shop and asking, "Can I have a quarter of sherbet lemons, please?" And there would be the shopkeeper who would be, "Oh yes, of course you can." Had one of those old Avery weighing machines, and he always put just a little extra in, and it went over the quarter mark. And you were quietly excited because you hadn't noticed, or at least that's what you thought. Very wise, because he knew you'd always be coming back to his shop because he seemed a very generous shopkeeper. And you had that sort of rapport with people in the old days. Not so with the problem now where you're seeing in the supermarkets there's something wrong in the baggage area, and you can't negotiate anything anymore. And that's a real sad situation, that the new generation coming up paying with their phones, not realizing that everything is being looked at, spied at, and kept secret. Those private transactions with cash is absolutely essential that we hang on to and keep, because who else needs to know what I'm dealing with when I'm dealing with somebody over here? And how easy the younger generation are being seduced with this modern technology. And that's not to say modern technology is at all bad in and of itself. It is very useful, let's face it. If we could all afford some solar panels on our houses or in our garden, perhaps we could not have to bother with the monopoly of the utilities and say, well, actually, I don't need to pay all your ridiculously high bills now because I can generate my own energy. And thank you very much. Don't need you. Goodbye. Wouldn't that be a lovely state to be in, to be self-sufficient, subsistence, growing your own food and having no need to do that 9-to-5 slave labor and making other people, i.e. bankers and politicians, rich?
No idea what's happened. Which has been burning for years, and we've had no problem with global warming at all from any of it. So I can see now that, hopefully with Philip Foster coming on later in our programme today, that we'll be able to talk about global warming or climate change, which has got nothing to do with whether I burn a log fire or not.
Yes, and the thing about all of this is that in the old days of basicness, we didn't have to worry about all these big so-called global issues. We just got on with our lives. We got on with our families and our friends, and we enjoyed ourselves. And these sort of big events that are supposedly destroying the planet were not really an issue. I mean, of course, we've been told about this global warming on and off for so long now. It's such a boring tale because nothing ever happens. The Maldives are still there, yet we were promised they were going to disappear. And the rich people telling us all of this, they're buying these seaside apartments on these very lovely places which ought to be underwater. It seems very strange that that's the sort of places they would choose if they knew that global warming was really happening and the ocean was going to rise. So we need to just ignore all of this nonsense and deal with ourselves and just have more fun and stop worrying about some of the nonsense. But I will be very interested to hear what he's got to say for sure. But it's my pleasure, and good luck with the rest of the day.